Good afternoon. Welcome to a special edition of Imsa's Wednesday Wisdom with Sarah Megan Thomas. Please welcome Imsa President, Suzanne Wilson Heckenberg.
Thank you. I'm pleased to have Sarah Megan Thomas here with us today. But before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping rules with our viewers. We have close to 500 virtual attendees today. So please take a moment, look at the box on the right side of your screen and pose a question throughout the program. Please consider including both your name and organization with your question. Also, a reminder today, we do have members of the press in attendance. This event is on the record and will be available for reviewing within the next 48 hours on our website. Also, I'm pleased to have my good friend, Megan Jaffer, who's the event partner with Amazing Women of the IC. She's also the executive director at Geodata Corporation. We're pleased to have AWIC as a partner for today's event. And Megan, over to you to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Suzanne. The Amazing Women of the IC, better known as AWIC, is pleased to partner with Imsa to help bring this event to life. AWIC is dedicated to the development of professional women serving the United States National Security Mission. Our group brings together amazing women throughout our community to support, empower, and inspire one another at all stages of their careers. Now, it is my privilege to introduce today's speaker. Sarah Megan Thomas is an award-winning actress, producer, and writer. For her latest feature, A Call to Spy, Ms. Thomas not only wrote the screenplay, she produced and plays the legendary spy Virginia Hall. Previously, she created the concept, co-wrote the story, and starred in the groundbreaking film Equity, which was honored with a Women's Image Network Award and the Creative Coalition Spotlight Award. A graduate of Williams College, Ms. Thomas trained at both the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts and Drama Studio London. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, ladies. Great to be here.
Good to have you here. Thank you, Megan, and thanks to AWIC for your support and partnership. So, Sarah, I've enjoyed a couple of conversations leading up to today's webinar. But one of the things that I have found fascinating to hear from you is a little bit about the motivation behind this film, particularly highlighting Virginia Hall, which there's not that much, or there wasn't that much out about her until you created this film. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a filmmaker, I actually always start global and then go micro. So I start with the genre that I think is commercial, but missing a female lens. So for example, my last film was the first female-driven Wall Street movie. With A Call to Spy, I knew that I wanted to do a spy drama, spy thriller. I love James Bond films, but they tend to be a romance, and they're missing the female lens of what it's like day in and day out to be a female spy on the ground, the psychology. And I studied World War II extensively at Williams College and knew there were female spies, knew about Churchill's secret army. So I started digging in there. And when I uncovered Virginia Hall, literally the spy the Nazis dubbed the most dangerous of all Allied spies, period, male, female, anything. And there was no movie about her. That was the aha moment of this is a movie that just has to be made.
Well, we are grateful you did. And also that you formatted it and produced it in a way that it's PG-13. And so those of us with younger children, it's an appropriate movie for them as well. So you don't see that as often with World War II movies. So we're going to play a clip real quick about Virginia and her contributions to the war effort. For those who have not seen the movie yet, this should be a great way to get your attention and ensure that you watch it in the next few days. So I'm going to turn it over to the folks behind the scenes to share that clip with us.
Tea or scotch?
Scotch would be lovely.
What brings you here, Miss Hall?
Ever since I can remember, I've wanted to be a diplomat.
Due to your condition, it will not be possible for you to qualify.
I had an accident.
I'd like to invite you to try out for a club you can join.
She has a wooden leg.
No one will suspect a pretty American reporter with a limp of being guilty of anything.
The Gestapo won't go easy on you just because you're a woman.
I don't plan to go easy on them because they're men. I understand. Sitting on the sidelines seems safe. You doing nothing is what the Germans are counting on. Resist.
The Germans will stop at nothing till they find you.
I'm not giving up. We're not giving up.
So they showed Virginia's wooden leg, right, in this clip. And I recall you're saying that it was a part of who she was, but she didn't let it define her. Can you tell me how you worked that theme throughout the movie and how that handicap, so to speak, made her more effective?
Absolutely. So it was really important to me in the research to uncover how she felt about her wooden leg. She wasn't born with it, right? She had a tragic hunting accident when she was 27 and with her father's shotgun accidentally shot her leg off. And, you know, the Germans called her the limping lady, but when I spoke to living relatives, etc., you know, she, by all accounts, wanted to hide her limp unless it was part of her cover, and she was not going to let that disability stop her from what she believed was her calling. And I think that's really what, as an actress, I latched onto, because it was so important to me to understand her leg, who she named Cuthbert, and really was a part of her, but she didn't let that leg define her. Even though in the 1930s and 40s, prostheses were only made for men. So it didn't even fit her leg, and she was in pain every day of her life, and yet she didn't let that stop her, and I found that just incredible.
So speaking of pain and wooden legs, you mentioned that during the filming, you sustained an injury from the role you were portraying. Can you share with us? I mean, from our looking at movie production, we don't realize these types of injuries that folks sustain sometimes from their work.
Yeah, so getting into playing Virginia Hall, I always had to wear some contraption on my left leg, even if I was off camera, just acting with the other actor myself, because I felt like that's what really hooked me into her, that and also listening to Churchill's speeches, but I divert. But anyway, so I wore a wooden contraption on my leg that tied to my back for shooting, and then I think it was week 1, my back went out because it was so heavy, and we switched to styrofoam and all different kinds of things. And then after shooting, because my tendon had been weakened, I ruptured my Achilles tendon, had to have surgery from complications, couldn't walk for almost a year. And it gave me such, I mean, I don't even know if I could have more respect for Virginia Hall, but it gave me a new perspective of, you know, as a confident woman, I was in a wheelchair, people look at you a certain way. And it just gave me this whole new level of what she had to overcome to thrive as a spy. And she did. She was incredible.
So kudos to you for going through all that, you know, for the movie. So clearly you have a passion for Virginia Hall's story, as well as strong women in general and some of the individuals that you've portrayed. But there's a business side to all of this too, right? You're not running a charity here, even though you love what you do. For those of you all who've not seen the movie, you can go to acalltospymovie.com, and there are various ways you can purchase the movie and download it and watch it. But can you talk to us a little bit about the business side of producing a film of this nature?
Absolutely. So this is a low budget independent film, and it is financed, as was my last film, Equity, by individual people, investors, and tax credits. We did receive a 25% tax credit in Philadelphia and Budapest, and actually we chose shooting locations partially based on budgetary restrictions and tax credits. So with an independent film, and especially one like this that is a hidden figures of the spy world made by a team of women, it is very important that long-term the film is financially successful. My last film was, and that's what's going to allow us to continue to tell these stories, because there are all these studies, and women directors, women producers, women screenwriters, women composers. I mean, we are in the minority in film still. And we need to change that because there are so many diverse stories that can and should be on screen.
And I believe, well, the three main characters are all females, and you, as the writer and the producer, and wasn't there also a female director as well?
Yes, so I made it my priority to hire a female director and brought on board the amazing Lydia Dean Pilcher to direct this film. And she shares a similar passion with me about, hiring more women behind the camera. So then we went on and to hire a female costume designer, female production designer, and a female composer, which is very rare in this business. That said, I mean, you also need men on set. You have to have balance, and we have a male editor who's fantastic. So it's just about finding the equality on set, and especially for these female-driven stories, I felt like the director had to be a woman.
Right. Well, that makes sense. So, I mentioned to you that after watching the movie, I downloaded a couple of books to my Kindle, and I'm kind of obsessed now with Virginia Hall. So thank you for that. But you mentioned to me that before you wrote the screenplay for this film, there were very few, if only maybe one book that you were aware of about Virginia Hall out there. So how did you do your research? Who did you talk to learn more about Virginia personally?
Yeah, so this is an original screenplay. So as you mentioned, it's not based on any book, and most of the books about Virginia Hall are relatively new and just came out this year or last year, which is, just great for everybody. But I started my research with the spy files, which are available. So the three women in the film, which is Virginia and then Vera Atkins and Noor Nayab Khan, there are files on them, and they include letters they wrote back, how they were perceived in training, the facts of what happened. So I really started there. And then in addition, was able to connect with friends and living relatives and the OSF and putting together all that research. I had tons. And then the question is, how do you make that into a 2-hour movie? All that stuff filtered down. And that was one of the challenges, because you can certainly just research forever.
Well, and I'm sure even getting some of that level of detail from her family was difficult, because I understand she didn't really talk about her service to, the war effort very much.
Totally, that's a great question. It was a different time, and she was a spy. She didn't give interviews, but even with her family, she didn't talk about the war extensively and what happened. And so as an actress and even as a writer, you're stuck with facts from files, but how do you get under the hood of who the human being is to try and play her? Because I felt a huge responsibility to try and get it right, because she was a living person. So for me, speaking with Linda Lorna and Brad Catlin and talking about things like she was the pirate chief in the school plays, or she wore a snake bracelet to school, or she called herself cantankerous, or she was always in pain with her limp. Those details really helped infiltrate the personality. And then, there are 100 great actresses who could play Virginia Hall, all in different ways. And at the end of the day, you do have to bring yourself to the role in terms of how you connect as a human being if you were in those circumstances.
That's helpful. So we're going to play a clip of Noor, who faced her own challenges, both as racially a minority, and she was also a female. But after we show the clip to our virtual attendees, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about her character and her background.
Excuse me? Hello. May I speak with you?
Yes?
Rumor has it you are the best wireless operator in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. Why did you join?
We all have to play our part.
And what is your part, Noor?
I'm a British citizen, and I grew up in France. It's my home. I cannot just stand by and let the Nazis do what they're doing.
I would like to invite you to try out for a club unlike any other.
Get it.
Our first female wireless. Good luck to you.
Your family needs you here. I have to do something.
So can you share a little more background on Noor and any sort of character research? Was there anything, probably, I mean, if there weren't a lot of books out there about Virginia Hall, there certainly probably wasn't not very much about Noor.
Yeah, again, it went to the spy files, which are fascinating because how she was perceived, doll-like, not qualified to be a spy. You know, if this girl's a spy on Winston Churchill, like those are real things in her spy files, and yet she turned out to be brave and a great spy. So Noor Nayat Khan was the first female wireless sent by the SOE to France to be a spy. And she was a Muslim and she was a pacifist, and she had to overcome those feelings and find a job that she could do and could thrive in, even though she was a pacifist, and that was being, you know, a wireless operator. Noor and Virginia actually never met, and that is the fiction that I created in this script. And the reason I put them together in time and space is because Virginia was the first female field agent, Noor was the first female wireless, and they were both from different backgrounds, different nationalities, yet they united to resist evil, and their diversity is actually what proved critical to the success of their missions. So I hoped that by staying true to the arc of what happened to each of their lives, but putting them in one movie together, it would allow for a global conversation about the different types of ways that you can resist. And, you know, Noor did try, and she was caught, she did try and escape twice. So I put that in the movie, and she was ultimately killed. And her last words were Liberté, which was, you know, the original title to this film, Liberté, A Call to Spy. So again, I tried to stay really close to the facts in terms of the arc of her life.
So you introduced a term to me that I wasn't familiar with, and I bet most of our virtual attendees aren't either, that ties in with this, but it's REEL, R-E-E-L, R-E-E-L versus R-E-A-L. And I think a good example of that is I really appreciated that you incorporated the OSS head, Major General Wild Bill Donovan, into the film. And I understand in real life, he actually pinned Virginia Hall with the Distinguished Service Cross. However, it's not real clear if they ever made contact in person prior to that. But that is, you bring him into the film, which I thought was a really important aspect.
Yeah, I did that with little details all across the way. So for example, Virginia Hall is famous for a prison break, which could be the real estate for a whole movie. And we didn't have, you know, the money to do some epic prison break, nor the real estate in this movie to do it. But I wanted to make sure there was a prison break, but I couldn't do it the way Virginia did it. So what we did is there is a prison break, and I researched the ways that these spies broke other spies out of prison. And one of the ways was a Monopoly game. Now, this wasn't the way Virginia Hall did it, but they did use Monopoly games where with the Geneva Convention, they could give prisoners games and they'd slip wrenches, etc. under. So I used a fact from over here and a fact from over here and combined them. And Donovan, yeah, Wild Bill Donovan, I loved putting him with Vera, who's Vera Atkins, played by Stana Katic, who's just very spunky too. And I wanted to make sure he was included.
So I may not have reached this part in the book that I'm reading, but did Vera and Virginia actually know each other in real life? Was that a relationship that actually existed? Because it's a very big part of the movie, I think.
Yeah, so Vera knew Virginia and Vera knew Noor, but Vera did not find Virginia as the script has, right?
Okay.
So that's not how Virginia came to work for the SOE. Vera was very close with Noor of the two. In fact, you know, after the war, Vera went and spent much of her life tracking down what happened to each and every one of the women who went missing because she felt so responsible. But yes, she did know both women.
So I'm getting some questions from our virtual attendees. I would encourage folks to continue to submit them. Jetta May Valdez asks, can you give examples of any interesting preparations the cast or crew members undertook to get ready for their roles?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has a totally different method. I think it all started with research. So everyone wanted to research the roles, from Stana and Radhika to Linus Roach, who plays Buckmaster, who's a real character. And then it came to different things on set. You know, for me, I listened because I was producing and writing. Sometimes you don't have a lot of time to switch hats, and producing and writing is very planned, and acting has to be very in the moment. So I really would listen to Churchill's speeches for 5 minutes, and that right there and then got me into the time frame. Stana also had her earphones in, but actors are usually very private about what it is that gets them to the role, you know?
So for those who've tuned in when I've moderated these webinars before, I always encourage students, usually it's college students, grad students, to ask questions. But here's a new one. We have Neve Maloney, age 8. Thank you for making this movie. What is your next movie going to be about? Please consider having young girls star in it too. Love your question.
I love your question. I have a newborn girl, Madison, who just came home from the hospital a week ago. So I'm planning for the rest of my life to make strong female roles. You know, my next film will definitely be about a powerful woman in a popular genre. And I really loved the true story aspect of this film, which is the first time I've done kind of inspired by true stories. So I'm looking for more hidden figures that are women whose stories have yet to be told in film. Stay tuned.
Well, I'm sure our viewers have some ideas they'd love to share with you. So Amanda Katora asked, I'm interested in hearing about the revision process for your screenplay, and if you had any criticism from folks for things that maybe you cut out and how you evaluated it.
That's a great question. Yes, you always get criticism, and you know, yeah, and some of it's valid and great, and you have to like sit down and think about it. And it's like, because each version of the script is a different baby, and then you have to cut 10 pages and delete this character. And you know, my parents are both lawyers. Did it drop?
We did. Let's see if we can get you another camera request.
Okay,
Hold
cool.
on for just a moment.
Yep. Yep, I see.
There we go.
Okay, so my parents are both lawyers, and so they did teach me that writing is rewriting, and I think that's the revision process went from first script all the way through the edit process. And you know, actors bring comments like, this line doesn't work for me, it doesn't feel natural, and you have to take those on because it's really important that everyone feels comfortable.
So kind of along those lines of revisions, Terry from the Office of Naval Intelligence says she found the movie extremely well done, well written, well acted, and well directed. She also found that many of the details about Virginia Hall matched what she already knew. She wants to know how you decided where to change those details and where to stay very close to the true facts. Good question, Terry.
Yeah, great question. I had to change the details when you were tracking the plot of the story, because this film does follow 3 women, and the overarching theme is the beginning of the war, when women in general were sent in as an experiment and they didn't know if they were going to succeed or fail. So various details may have gotten dropped. For example, Virginia had contacts in a brothel. Well, that's not in this movie, but I put Noor in a safe house with a brothel, you know, so there's a little reference to that those were women who helped the resistance. Dr. Javan is a composite character in this movie of codename Pepin, Dr. Rousseau, who really was, that's played by Rossi Sutherland in the movie, who really was Virginia's right-hand man, so to speak, of the locals helping with the resistance in France. But I couldn't make that the movie, so certain details of that got dropped, which is why I kind of changed his name and made him more of a composite. It really had to do with the medium of a 2-hour movie versus a miniseries, which I would love to do.
I mean, I'm only a quarter of a way through the book I'm reading, and it could be a complete miniseries, and I would binge watch it. So no shame there. So, so I know the movie, the world premiere was in Edinburgh, Scotland, I believe. What is the significance of the premiere there? And also, it premiered in the States on October 2nd, but I know you're rolling out in other places in the coming months. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was very important to me to premiere this movie in the UK because it is a UK story at its heart. And Scotland is where our spies historically trained, which is in the film. And we were able to premiere on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, which just seemed like, you know, the place to take this movie to open. And then we did do a couple festivals here in the States before the pandemic. And then IFC Films released it nationwide here October 2nd. It will be in theaters and on demand in the UK, October 23rd. And we have just closed an India deal, but I can't tell you the details of that yet. And it will be in theaters in Australia and New Zealand over the holidays.
Okay. So you mentioned that this film, you didn't have a humongous budget, right? That you mentioned Budapest and Philadelphia and some tax incentives or credits, but you also did a lot of filming for a lot of different scenes, I believe, in one particular house. Could you go into a little more detail about that?
Absolutely. So this is a cool story. So I'm from Philly, and so I've brought all my films here because I know the tax credit and I've gotten it before, but also there's just a network of people that are willing to kind of open their doors to indie filmmaking. And one of the biggest tips in indie filmmaking is you don't want to move locations a lot because time is money and it takes time to pack up and move. So anyway, we found the house of, it's called our Drossen Estate. And it's the house of the family that inspired the Philadelphia story. And it's a real life replica of their home in Scotland, which is very similar to the mansions where these spies historically trained. And it's fully furnished with period furniture. So Joni let us shoot there. We were the first film to be allowed to shoot there. And not only did we shoot like what we could never dress, this beautiful period furnished home, but we also shot the torture in the basement, and we dressed upstairs for France, and the outside here was parts of Scotland, and the outside there was parts of France. So we really, I forget if it's 11 days, 12 days, but we shot there for a long, long time.
Well, I think you and your team are very resourceful in repurposing space. So very creative. So you've already tackled female spies during World War II, and you've tackled the women of Wall Street. Is there any other traditionally male dominated field that you would want to delve into from a screenplay, production, acting standpoint?
You know, Silicon Valley is very interesting to me. I have a friend from college who runs a company in Silicon Valley, Spit and Ice Cream. And we actually partnered on this film. So she created spy ice cream tied to each historical flavor that you can order. But anyway, I've heard stories from her, and I've heard stories from other women in Silicon Valley. And I think that could be quite interesting.
So Colleen Yakub asked a question, and we lost your video again. So I'll pause for just a moment.
I got the link.
Okay, there you go. She asked a question that I wanted to ask as well, but she says, thank you for making this movie. I was blown away by the 3 strong women and can't wait to see your next film. She can't find the movie on DVD yet. She's thinking of holiday gifts. Are there any books about these characters that you would recommend?
So the DVDs aren't out yet, and yes, they will be out by the holidays. So those go on sale, I believe, in a month or so, but everything's on the website at calltospymovie.com. And then books, yeah, I mean, I read A Woman of No Importance, I think about 2 months ago, and I think that's a fantastic book on Virginia Hall. And then there's Hall of Mirrors by Craig Gralley. He actually hiked over the Pyrenees Mountains himself, the same path that Virginia Hall did to escape the Nazis with her wooden leg. So that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, I watched that hike on film and was not envious of that journey at all. So we know you met with or talked with some of the family members, but did you talk to any individuals, men or women, currently working in the intelligence community or who have recently served the IC?
I did speak with some women who have worked in intelligence, but not related necessarily to Virginia Hall, so to speak, more just what it's like to work in the intelligence community. which was just helpful research. I spoke with Fran Moore, who's amazing. Yeah.
And a shout out to Fran for making the introduction for the two of us. So we wouldn't be here today. So here's a question from Caroline Henry. And she asked, what are the challenges that COVID-19 presented when you were producing the film? But as I recall the timeline, maybe COVID didn't affect the production, but it affected more the rollout of the film, correct? Tell us kind of the time frame for those of us who've never produced a movie before.
Yeah, we were lucky enough that the film was done before COVID hit, but it deeply affected the rollout, because what you do with an independent film is we'd be doing this live, you know, this Zoom in general, or, you know, all the Q&A screenings that we've done over the past 3 months, the festivals. We had to not go to festivals because of the piracy concern. So you lose so much of the word of mouth. But above and beyond that, this film, in my view, is not best watched on an iPhone. Just because, whereas Equity you totally could, and a lot of movies you can, but it is a World War II drama. It does build. It doesn't necessarily work as well if you watch it over 4 or 5 sittings. And so the communal experience of the theater was lost with this. It is still in select theaters where theaters are open and people are comfortable, and that's amazing. But it would have been a much bigger theatrical release. And I can say, you know, having seen it in theaters and festivals before COVID, you know, for the last act of the movie, there was just a silence in the movie theater. It's almost like going to a play. There's a real communal experience that was lost, not just for me, for so many films. So that was a little heartbreaking. But on the positive side, you know, drive-ins are big again. Like, everyone's being innovative and finding a way.
Well, and didn't you first, I think, screen it at a drive-in, maybe in Philadelphia? Was that?
Yeah, so we did a drive-in in Philly a couple days before it launched, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, drive-ins are great.
So Katie Naquin wants to know, have you discovered any misconceptions out there about women spies, particularly women spies of that genre during the 1940s?
I think not misconceptions per se, but nobody knows about these women, is what I would say, and how powerful they were. In other words, they weren't just cogs in a machine. They were change makers. They were awarded every award you could possibly be awarded for bravery, and yet these women aren't in our history books. So I think that's what time and again people are saying, why haven't I heard about these women? There must be more women like this, and how can we hear about them?
So throughout the movie, you know, we were kind of reminded that Virginia, and I don't want to give the entire movie away, but Virginia applied multiple times. She wanted to be a diplomat, and she was continually rejected, because she was a woman, but I understand there were a few female diplomats out there at the time, but primarily because she had a wooden leg. And really the only, from my understanding, the only thing it prohibited her from doing was like running at a sprint pace, right? But can you talk a little bit about her journey after she served and what she did when she came back to Great Britain and the States?
Yeah, so Virginia Hall's a woman, like you said, who didn't take no for an answer. She was rejected many times from being a diplomat. At one point, she failed the test because she just wanted to do things, and then it had to do with her disability, and people just kept saying no, and she was very qualified to be a diplomat. So she became successful for the British. She went back, which is in the end of the movie without giving anything away, working for the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. And then after the war, she ultimately became the first woman to work for the CIA. And she did ultimately marry someone she met from the OSS, and lived a really happy life, but she never got to be a diplomat. So she found another way, which I love.
Well, I think that's inspiring, right? She took a different path, but was still able to fulfill, some of her passion. So Grace McAllister wants to know what your greatest takeaway was from researching, writing, and creating this film. Is there something specific that you hope viewers take away from watching this?
Absolutely. I think that the themes of the film have gotten more relevant in the 4 years that I've been working on it. And I think that there's this phrase going around that we're all in this together. And I think these women understood that in the early 1940s. And I hope, first and foremost, that people are entertained and they love the movie and they maybe discover something they didn't know. But I think the best movies are ones that you talk about and reflect after. And I hope that the viewer asks, what would I do? What would I do if someone told me I have a 50-50 chance of survival, 6 weeks maximum, like life expectancy in the field, most likely to fight for something I believe in, no matter what it is? Did we lose?
We did, but we know the drill now. So,
Okay. So, you know, this is really a movie about women from different nationalities and different backgrounds, and they found a way to unite and fight for what they believe in. So whatever you do believe in, you know, that you can stand up for it. Because I don't know what I would do, you know, as a mom of 2 kids. Would I put my life on the line in that scenario? I hope I would, but it's a tough question that we all have to ask ourselves.
Indeed, we do. So Valerie Kerbin says, I am so very excited to watch your movie. I did see from the clip you have a great cast. Kudos to you. How did you attract Linus, and I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, Roche, from the Homeland Spy series to act in your movie?
So Linus actually came through our director and casting director. Linus knew Lydia from some other projects, and we had an amazing casting director, Heidi Levitt, and they brought me the suggestion, and I was just like, yeah, sign me up. And you know, Heidi, our casting director, had quite a job to do because she had to put together a cast from around the world, and she did a magnificent job. And actually, Radhika Apte was my first choice for Nora, and you never get your first choice in indie film. But I'd seen her in a movie called Parched, which was a small indie at Tribeca Film Festival, and loved her, and we offered her the role, and she said yes.
Well, I say it worked out quite well for everyone. So something you said early on, which I thought was really interesting. You mentioned that you used spy files as your primary source material. Can you tell us, like, how did you get access to those? Are they available to anybody? Do you have to get, you know, a certain sign off from somebody in order to view these?
No, I mean, I did write for research requests and receive files, you know, even the OSS, they'll send you, but those weren't as helpful because they were post when this movie starts. But yeah, there are unclassified documents that everybody is, you know, all the books have these documents. They're kind of the same set. And I will say one of the things that was so important to me is to try and retain a few lines from what was in these files. So some of the more quote unquote archaic lines in the movie are real lines. And I was like, I wouldn't let them get cut. So one example is Virginia Hall, you know, wrote back to London, and I'm going to butcher the line, but it was something like, you know, it's my neck, and if I want to get a crick in it, that's my prerogative. And I thought that was so gutsy, and that was so her character. And I was like, that's going in the movie, you know? So.
Yeah, there were a couple of zingers like that that I thought were very well done and delivered, I mean, at the right time. So, so Joe DeRoca wants to know, are there any common mistakes that script writers, particularly script writers who've only done maybe a few scripts, make in the spy genre, or just in general, like lessons learned?
Sure. First, I mean, I could go on about this for a long time, but a film is visual, so wanting to make sure you're writing for that visual world. Second, have a strong inciting incident. So this is like structure, and I'm a big structure girl, but you know, you have to have an incident in the first 10 pages that changes the course of the future of the hero. So for Virginia Hall, for example, in this movie, she's rejected from being a diplomat, and then she meets Vera, and it sets her on a new path. And then the third thing, which I hate to say, but it is really true, is cut the first 10 pages.
Cut the first 10 pages.
Yeah, okay. It's brutal, because then you shoot them and cut them. In general, it's a stereotype, but it's true a lot of the time.
So I think being a good writer is helpful in almost any profession. Did you major, minor in college in English, literature, journalism, or anything? Or what inspired you to write the screenplay other than the characters?
Well, my mom really taught me how to write, and back in high school, with English papers, she was brutal. She'd, on a Sunday, like redline my assignments, and then her handwriting was messy, and she'd say it in your own words. So she'd have done something brilliant, and then I couldn't read it. And I would be like 15, 16, and be like, Mom! And she's like, it's your paper. So I was one class short of being an English major. I was actually a theater major at Williams, but I did take a lot of English classes. But I think writing is rewriting, and I've gotten better as I go along, but you don't start there. It's a process.
Right, and I'm sure there are a lot of differences between writing a screenplay, versus writing a short story or a poem, say. Totally different, style and cadence and structure. So
absolutely. And I went to Barnes and Nobles back when Barnes and Nobles was open and people went, right? And I rented. I bought all the books on screenwriting and I just read them. And I do think that actors make good screenwriters because they know the words that feel natural and they want to say. But the structure of screenwriting is fairly straightforward, and I actually think easier than a novel, so to speak, because you're writing what the camera sees and the lines. You're not writing paragraphs of descriptions of the internal. You have to write like actions, like picks up the cup, twists the,
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about the comparison that way. So Joseph Boutte from Dun & Bradstreet asked, and we've kind of skirted around this, but what are some ideas that you are considering for future projects? And would you still want to pursue being the screenplay writer, the producer, and the actress? Are there other capacities you'd want to work in, or we just really I know you're getting this movie out there and launch, but what's next?
Yeah, I definitely want to take on directing at some point, but I won't take on all 4 roles. I'll drop one hat somewhere along the way. I love to act and perform. I love to write. I love to produce. So I think it depends on what the project is, on what I feel is right. I certainly will take on projects that I don't write 100%. I think it just has to be something that drives you for 3 or 4 years, 7 days a week, because that's what it takes to make a movie. And it has to be something new, because that's how you get it above the, how you get the press, how you get it out there. And it definitely, for me, has to have a female lens. That doesn't even necessarily mean that the lead has to be a woman, but there has to be an untold story somewhere about a powerful woman in the mix.
So I mentioned earlier to folks that they can access the movie at acalltospymovie.com. But I think, I know I've enjoyed getting to know you and your story and your journey to where you are now, and you're being able to bring this film to us. Are there other ways folks can engage with you? Any sort of social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, if people are interested to see what comes next?
Yeah, sure. So there's a Twitter site for the film, A Call to Spy, and then mine is just at Sarah Megan T, and then my Instagram is Sarah Megan Thomas. So certainly post updates there.
Great. Well, I know folks have enjoyed making this connection this afternoon and would like to see that continue. So we've got about another minute or two. Any parting thoughts about Virginia? Something that maybe you didn't get to share in the movie, or an unknown fact that would be a good takeaway for folks today?
I don't know if it's an unknown fact, but I think it's a good lesson. Like, no is just a word on the pathway to yes. And I think that was what she lived by, and she was successful.
Indeed, she was. So I would encourage all of our viewers today to watch the movie, and also to access some of the books that Sarah referenced. Really appreciate our getting to know you here at Imsa, and you're taking the time this afternoon to share with us, to talk to us about the film, A Call to Spy. And Finally, I would just also like to thank our partner, AWIC, the amazing women of the IC, for their support of the program, as well as all of our virtual attendees. I'd also like to draw everybody's attention to a couple events coming up. Next week, we have Katie Arrington, the CISO for the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. Details to register for this webinar on our website. And I also want to draw everyone's attention to an event we host each year, which is near and dear to my heart, where we recognize outstanding intelligence community professionals who've had significant impacts on national security. This is at the Imsa Achievement Awards. These 6 awards recognized accomplishments by early to mid-career government, civilians, military personnel, homeland security officials, contractors, and folks from academia, as well as some of the more senior folks who mentor them. I would like to encourage everybody tuning in today to nominate a colleague, a coworker, or a client. You can download the nomination forms from our website, and we will close these nominations at the end of the month on October 30th. When the webinar ends today, there'll be a short survey that pops up. Please take a few moments to complete it. And this concludes today's program. I hope everyone stays safe and healthy and has a wonderful evening. And again, Sarah, thanks for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
You as well.